So in Genesis chapter 7, notice what it says here. You shall take with you of every clean animal 7 pairs, a male and his female, and of the animals that are not clean, 2, a male and his female. And of clean flying creatures of the sky, 7s, male and female, and of all unclean flying creatures, pairs, male and female, to maintain seed on all the land. So here's the thing. What's being described here is that after the flood occurs, it would be necessary to repopulate the land. And the ancients knew that after a natural disaster, a flood or a forest fire, fires were common. After these types of disasters, for long periods of time, creatures would really refuse to come back in and re-inhabit the region. It's a phenomena that occurs in nature. When a disaster strikes, it can be a dead zone for a long time. And what God is preparing for here with Noah is to jumpstart life in the land following the flood. That's essentially what's going on. And on page 5 of my book here in Genesis 7:14, you see note 2 circled here. All sorts of birds. These are all the animals entering into the ark, and Noah would have taken from among his domesticated creatures, and then God would have drawn some wild creatures to him. And it's not every creature on planet Earth. It's just creatures important to this region. And in 14, note 2 here, you see this note. Let me read this for you. When, however, the doctor passes to argument based upon natural science, we find what he adduces worthy of our attention, were it but for the inquiries which it suggests. If the deluge were but local, we find him saying, what was the need of taking birds into the ark, and among them birds so widely diffused as the raven and the dove? A deluge which could overspread the region which these birds inhabit could hardly have been less than universal. If the deluge were local, and all the birds of these kinds in that district perished, though we should think they might have fled to the inundated regions, it would have been useless to encumber the ark with them, seeing that the birds of the same species which survived in the lands not overflowed would speedily replenish the inundated tract as soon as the waters subsided. It will be found that the reasoning here is mainly based upon an error in the natural science, into which even naturalists of the last century, such as Buffon, not unfrequently fell, and which was almost universal among the earlier voyagers and travelers. The error of confounding as identical the merely allied birds and beasts of distant countries, and of thus assigning to species wide areas in creation which in reality they do not occupy. The grouse, for instance, is a widely spread genus, or rather family, for it consists of more genera than one. It is so extensively present over the northern hemisphere that Siberia, Norway, Iceland, and North America have all their grouse. The latter continent, indeed, from 5 to 8 different kinds. And yet so restricted are some of the species of which they consist that, were the British Islands to be submerged, one of the best known of the family, the red grouse, or moorfowl, Lagopus scoticus, would disappear from creation. This bird, which, rated at its money value, is one of the most important in Europe, for the barren moor which it frequents in the Highlands of Scotland alone are let every season almost entirely for its sake for hundreds of thousands of pounds, is exclusively a British bird, and, unless by miracle a new migratory instinct were given to it, a complete submersion of the British Islands would secure its destruction. If the submergence amounted to but a few hundred miles in lateral extent, the moorfowl would, to a certainty, not seek the distant inundated land. Nor is it at all to be inferred that in a merely local but widespread deluge, birds occupying a more extensive area than that overspread by the flood would, according to Dr. Quito, speedily replenish the inundated tract as soon as the waters had subsided. The statement must have been hazarded in ignorance of the peculiar habits of many of the non-migratory birds. Up till about the middle of the last century, the capercailzie, or great cock of the woods, was a native of Scotland. It was exterminated, however, about the time of the last rebellion, or not long after. The last specimen seen among the pine forests of Strathspey was killed, it is said, in the year 1745. The last specimen seen among the woods of Strathglass survived till the year 1760. Pennant relates that he saw in 1769 a specimen, probably a stuffed one, that had been killed shortly before in the neighborhood of Inverness. But from at least that time the species disappeared from the British Islands and, though it continued to exist in Norway, did not replenish the tracts from which it had been extirpated. The late Marquis of Breadalbane was at no small cost and trouble in reintroducing the species, and to some extent he succeeded, but the capercailzie is, I understand, still restricted to the Breadalbane woods. I have seen the golden eagle annihilated as a species in more than one district of the north of Scotland, nor, though it still exists in other parts of the kingdom and is comparatively common among the mountains of Norway, have I known it in any instance to spread anew over the tracts from which it had been extirpated. So much for the general reasonings of Dr. Quito. And this comes from Miller, Testimony in the Rocks, pages 292 to 4. And so the point is, important creatures were drawn to Noah, and Noah took from among his animals onto the ark. And this isn't necessarily the only creatures of this sort on earth, but after the flood, the creatures disembarked, and this jump-started repopulating the land following the flood. That's what it was all about.